You didn't have a good hunting trip?
I not successful.
So in like Pearson v. Post language, would love labor until we had nothing to show for it?
Sure.
Funny. It's true though. Labor theory would reward someone like you was a lot of effort into it, can't catch the damn bird. Was anyone else successful?
No, we got one. We missed like a lot.
What kind of bird were you hunting? Is that hard to hunt? I only know the video game.
It should be easy.
I know duck hunt from Nintendo. That's all I know. Is it? No.
Sure a lot of people are happy.
I'm sure the ducks are happy. All right. Anything else? Anything on your minds? Any questions? All right. So we're about to start a new topic today. We're done with the entire process of selling property with the contract, warranties, and all the other stuff. We're back to the next part of the topic, which is probably, I think, the most difficult part of the topic, which has to do with controls on land. Okay? So any questions on what came before? Anything on your minds? No? Okay. All right, good. So let's move on then. So the topic we're starting today has this broad language, this broad umbrella of something called servitudes. Okay? It's a phrase I don't much care for because it doesn't really make much sense, the word itself. Okay? And what makes this class more difficult than others is that the language, the way things are called, varies wildly. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Well, in this topic, virtually everything has several different names. And each name has a significance where one thing can do multiple jobs. Okay? So the most difficult part of this entire topic is that the labeling is very confusing. Right? What's going to make this topic a little bit easier is my promise to you that I will call something what's supposed to be called. Okay? I know that doesn't sound like much of a promise now, but we're going to use terminology consistently throughout. When I call something an easement, it's going to be an easement. When I call something a covenant, it's going to be a covenant. I ask you to do the same. Let's try and get our terminology correct, and this topic will make a lot more sense. Deal? Okay. So let's actually start focusing on this. The broad umbrella of this topic is called servitudes, right? Why is it called servitudes? Because if you think about it, one piece of land is actually serving another. You actually are able to have one piece of land or its owner serving someone else. So today, most land controls are imposed by the government, right? In most cities, not Houston, you have zoning codes saying your property has to be a certain number of feet from the curb and it has to be a certain number of floors tall. And in this area, you can only have residential, you can't have commercial. Or you have different environmental regulations, right? At every single step along the way, you have governmental regulations telling you how you can and can't use your property. Okay? But that's fairly new. Governmental regulations of land use is a product of the 20th century. This stuff didn't exist 100 years ago. Okay? So for most of recorded civilization, right, at least in the Western Hemisphere, the way you controlled land was through private arrangements. Not by the government setting one set of rules for everyone, but by individual parties making arrangements of how to manage land. And this was done out of necessity. The government wasn't in the business of controlling land use. So if you had one property, Blackacre, and your neighbor had another called Whiteacre, and he was doing something you didn't like, your only way of getting to stop that was to enter in a private agreement, right? Or a private arrangement, okay? This is what servitudes are. These servitudes are private arrangements by which people control the use of someone else's land. Some of these servitudes are positive. It says, hey, you have some nice water on your land. Can I come onto your land and take some of that water? Right? Some of these servitudes are negative. You know, hey, you have that smoky factory on your land that's making all this smoke and it's making me sick. How about I pay you to stop making that smoke. So these servitudes can take either a positive or a negative form. And these are all based on arrangements. Okay? Everyone with me so far? Now, the tricky part about servitudes, and you should realize from the first 3 pages of the readings, is that the labels for them are somewhat murky. They're blurred lines between the different labels. So you have these things called easements, right? You have these things called covenants. These are your 2 main tools to control the use of land. And in almost every case, what you can do with an easement can also be accomplished with a covenant, and vice versa. They're more or less interchangeable. The biggest difference between the two, is how they bind future parties. And this is, I think, the hardest part of the entire class. We'll do next week, I think. How is it that if I impose a servitude on a piece of land today, will it bind an owner in the future? Generally speaking, the servitudes go with the land. And that makes sense. If I put a restriction on it today, I want the next person to own it to also be bound by that restriction, right? It wouldn't make much sense for people to get around a restriction merely by selling the piece of property. This is no different than a mortgage or a lien or anything else we've discussed. When you put these restrictions on a piece of land, they usually go with the land, they run with the land, and they stay forever. Okay? So that's the hard part of this, figuring out who's bound by easements and covenants. Creating them is fairly easy. That's not the hard part. We'll do the creation of them today. The hard part comes in the next couple classes when we discuss how are they binding on future parties. Yeah.
If there's restrictions on a property, can the person who actually initially created them later on at some point release?
Yes. Yes. We'll get to that like next week. But always, yes, the original person who holds the future interest, so to speak, can always release the other parties for enough money. All right. Everyone get the general gist. So the phrase servitude seems intimidating, right? But if you think of these as ways to control the use of land on a private basis, it's a little bit less daunting. Right? The first genre, the first type of servitude we'll be talking about today, for today I think and tomorrow or next class, is called the easement. Okay. I don't want to talk about covenants today. I don't want to ever talk about profits. The book makes a really big deal about the profits, and these are effectively allowing someone else onto your land to like pick up minerals like trees or stuff. I'm not going to mention that ever again. It's not going to be the exam, I promise. So you can just ignore it. We're going to focus on easements and covenants, okay? And for today only, I only want to talk about easements. I don't want to talk about covenants. So the book discusses a couple of different types or frames, if you will, of an easement, right? So it gives this example, right? This is the first example. It says, A is given the right to enter on B's land, okay? A is given the right to enter on B's land. So let's be very precise in breaking down what's going on here. I know this might seem a little tedious, but I promise you it will be worthwhile. All right, where did I finish last time? Remember? I'll start right there. Okay. That's Stephanie, right? All right, Stephanie, let's be very precise. Why do you think A and B entered this arrangement?
Probably because B wants to go into A's land.
B, or who's going into whose land? So why did the two of them enter this arrangement?
So that like A doesn't get
What do you mean? Whoa, what? Very simple, right? Why would A and B ever reach this agreement?
maybe A had to go into B's land.
Why? Okay. You're overthinking this way too hard. Okay? Why, Rebecca, why would A and B reach this agreement?
To perform some type of act.
Yes, right. A wants to do something on B's land, right? Maybe there's a road that B wants to get to. And the only way A can get there is by crossing B's land, right? So they strike this agreement, right? A is given the right to enter B's land. Rebecca, what do you think B got out of this?
Maybe he was paid, or maybe.
Money, okay, money. So in this situation, one party is benefiting and one party is suffering a burden, right? Garrett, in this case, who has the benefit? I'm sorry, who has the benefit?
A has the,
Who has the burden?
B has the.
That's right. In this situation, this isn't hard to see. A is getting the benefit. He's able to cross onto the land. And then B is getting the burden, right? And I think as we mentioned before, why is B suffering this burden? Well, he was probably paid, right? We don't know, but generally speaking, people don't hand out easements for nothing. You usually pay for an easement. There's some sort of payment going on, okay? But let's be very precise, right? Let's say that A owns Blackacre and B owns Whiteacre. One of the difficult aspects about easements, and this is what's going to be hard to remember, is it's not always to the benefit of a person. Often easements are drawn in a way to benefit the owner of a piece of land, right? Think back to feudal times where the lifespan was like 30 years, right? If you had two properties next to each other and they negotiated some sort of easement, they wouldn't make it contingent upon a specific person entering or crossing property. Because what happens when the father dies? Can the son not cross over onto Whiteacre, or his grandson? So the way easements are generally structured, it's not to a person's name, but to the owner of a piece of land. So a better way of saying it, with who has the benefit, is we say that the owner of Blackacre has a benefit, right? Where the owner of Whiteacre has a burden. Everyone see that? This is done for a very simple reason. People die. And when that person dies, you want to make sure that the current owner can still cross over to Blackacre. I'm sorry, cross over to Whiteacre. Everyone see this? Okay. So I want you to drill into your heads when you think about easements. Don't think about don't think about B letting A cross. I want you to think that the owner of B is letting the owner of A cross. The owner of Whiteacre is letting the owner of Blackacre cross. If you get that into your heads, this will be a lot easier. Otherwise, we'll be confused. Everyone got that? All right. So let's try this one. Let's try this one. A, the owner of Blackacre, is given the right to prevent B, owner of Whiteacre, from polluting. Okay. Okay. So that's our second example. Okay. So Angela, in this case, the second one, where's the benefit? Exactly. Yes, you said it right. The benefit here, everyone see this, is to A, the owner of Blackacre. Right? A, the owner of Blackacre, can stop B from polluting. Okay, and Joseph, who here has the burden? Exactly. The burden here is on B, the owner of Whiteacre. Everyone see this? These are your two main types of easements. Okay? The first one is what's called an affirmative easement. Okay? Second one is what's called a negative easement. I think it's easy enough to see why they're called this. The affirmative easement is allowing someone to do something. The negative easement is stopping someone from doing something. Affirmative, negative, positive, negative, right? But nothing hard there, right? Okay. What's important to remember about these easements is that the benefits and the burdens are attached not to an individual, but to the owner of a piece of land. Okay? This is what's called, if you want to be precise, an easement appurtenant. An easement appurtenant. Piece. Okay? What does an easement appurtenant means? The benefits and burdens are not assigned to an individual person. They're assigned to the owner of a piece of land. Okay? The easement's tied to the land, not to an individual person. Yes?
Okay, so as long as you're saying that we should think of all easements as referring to the owner of property as opposed to whoever's name, why would you have to make a difference? Why would you have to say that there's easement?
Because we're going to do easements and gross in about 10 minutes.
That's a group of people?
The easement and gross is an easement tied to a person's name. That's the exception.
Okay.
Virtually all easements are drawn like this. I'll give you the general, they'll give you the exception in a couple
I
minutes.
guess we can.
Print it? So for now, follow me one step at a time. Right? We talk about the easement appurtenant. The easement appurtenant is an easement to a given piece of land. Right? So let's use a different example, right? Let's make up two pieces of land, right? So you have wet acre and you have dry acre, okay? And as the names might suggest, wet acre has a pond on it, and dry acre is quite dry, okay? The owner, right, of wet acre is A, and the owner of dry acre is B. Okay? B wants to be able to go onto the land. B wants to be able to go onto the wet acre. So they do an easement. So it'll look something like this, right? Easement says the owner of dry acre has the right to cross onto wet acre. Okay? All right? Okay? Everyone get this. The owner of dry acre has the right to cross onto wet acre. Right? So what happens now? Let's say, for example, that A sells wet acre to C. Okay? Slightly modified question. Okay? Trey, in this case, after this transaction occurs, who's the benefited party and who's the burden party?
Did you say A sells to C?
Yeah.
Okay, B, as the owner of dry acre is still gets the benefit, and C, as the owner of wet acre has the burden.
That's right. Everyone see that? All this illustrates is that when you transfer the ownership of a piece of property that's bound by an easement, right? When you transfer a piece of property bound by an easement, the burden or benefit carries over, right? And so Tim, let's say that B sells dry acre to D, right? Who has the benefit and who has the burden now?
D is the owner of dry acre.
Right. So right, D is owner of dry acre, has the benefit, And then who still has the burden? It was
Whoever.
it was C, right? Okay. Everyone get this. This concept of benefiting and burdening, right, is important to remember because it's the only way we can tell them apart. With any kind of covenant, one party is bearing the burden and one party is bearing the benefit. Now you say, Josh, what happens is both parties are benefiting and both parties are burdened, right? Those are often called mutual covenants. There actually are two sets of covenants. It's like, I do this for you and then you do this for me, right? It's going both ways. So in reality, you have dueling easements or dueling covenants. But to make this simple, we'll focus on one at a time. We'll get to the more complicated cases later. For now, assume that there's one burden party and one benefited party. Okay? Now, the terminology, unfortunately, can't be as simple as burden and benefit. That would be way too easy for you, right? That would make your lives way too simple, right? So instead, we have these other terms, right? The term is a dominant estate and the servient estate. Okay? The dominant estate and the servient estate, right? As you may imagine, the servient estate is the one that's burdened, and the dominant estate is the one that's benefited, right? That makes sense, right? The servient one, the one that serves, that's the burdened estate, and then the other one, the dominant, big and strong, right? That's one that's benefits, right? So let's see. Let's go that way. Daniel. So in this case, right, with wet acre and dry acre, which is the dominant and which is the servient estate?
The 1 acre is the servient estate.
Good. Yes. Wet acre is servient, and dry acre is a dominant. Everyone see that? Dry acre is getting the benefit because the owner of dry acre can cross over to the pond. Wet acre is the servient because that's to allow this other guy into their land. Okay? When you answer questions, I don't want you to give me the name of a person, right? If I'm asking about an easement appertenant, the answer is not A or B. When the question is about an easement appertenant, the answer is about a dominant estate or a servient estate, right? You have to frame your answers in terms of dominant and servient. Give me the name of a piece of land, not the name of a person. Everyone see that? All right. With all dominant and servient estates for easement appertenant, I want the name of a land, not person. All right. Any questions on this so far? Okay. But there's an exception to this rule. Of course there is, right? These are all what are called the easement appertenants. The next branch are called Easement and Gross. These are fairly, not modern, but these are fairly novel. And the goal of an Easement and Gross is to assign almost always a benefit to an individual person, not an owner of land. Right? So let's set the example again, right? Let's say that A owns a dry acre and then B owns wet acre, right? And then they do this, right? The easement looks like this, that A has the right to enter wet acre. Okay? This is what's called an easement and gross. Notice it doesn't say that the owner of dry acre can enter. It says A can enter. This is giving the easement to the benefit of one specific person. Okay? So while this easement's drafted, A can always cross. So now let me change the hypo a little bit. Let's say that A sells dry acre to C. Can C cross to wet acre? What do you think, other Daniel?
No.
The answer is no. A retains that easement no matter where he lives. right? A retains the easement no matter where he lives. Any future owners of dry acre don't have the ability to enter onto the land. So regardless of who owns dry acre, right? Regardless of who owns dry acre, A keeps it. Let's do that. So there are benefits and no pun intended. There are pluses and minuses to each, right? Generally speaking, easement and gross might be more expensive because now it won't be tied to an individual piece of land; it'll be tied to a person. Also, the fact is you might have to deal with lots of other people. So perhaps this one might be more desirable. Maybe you only want one person crossing your land. Maybe you don't want the next owner of dry acre to be crossing all the time. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, this is probably the easiest part of the easements, right? Separating the easements in gross from the easements that per tenant, right? Understanding which is a dominant estate and which is the servient estate. Okay. All right, that's not too bad. Questions? Yeah.
So if A sells the land, can he still enter even if he lives far away?
Yes. Yes, yeah. A can enter as long as he's alive. Where is he entering from? I don't know. But he can still enter onto the land. Is the hand up? No? That's not too bad, right? Okay. It gets worse in the next class. And the next reading, and particularly the one on covenants, you should read very carefully. But this much is pretty straightforward. So let's do let's do the first case, is Willard versus Church of Christ scientist case. All right, where was I up to? All right, Heath, take us. What were the facts in the Willard case?
Willard buys the piece of property from the guy who brought it from a lady, who was a member of the church.
The guy who bought it from a lady. Let's take a step back. Who is the original owner of here we have, here's a map. So you have lot 19 and you have lot 20. Lot 19 is the house, and then lot 20 is used as a parking lot. Okay, so who owns what initially?
You again?
Yeah, McGugan, yeah, the lady.
She is the original owner and a member of the church.
Okay, so McGugan owned both lots 19 and 20. And at various junctures, she let people on Sunday cross over and park on the lot because she was a member of the church. All right, keep going, Heath.
And she sold it to a guy at a fraction of the cost.
She sells which to the guy, though? Be very
The
precise.
lot that they park on.
No.
For both of them.
No. Initially, which one did she sell?
19.
Good. Initially, this guy only bought lot 19, right? He bought the lot with the house on it. Then he did something shady. What did he do?
He told this other part, Willard, that he would sell lot 20 to them, and without having like contract or
He didn't own it yet.
he didn't own it yet.
Okay, so this is going to be a common fact pattern, all of your questions for this semester, right? Someone is selling a piece of land they don't own. This happens every single case, okay? So he then contracts sell 19 and 20. So what does he do to kind of backfill it? How does he kind of make?
Finds like a buyer.
Okay, so he finds a buyer for 19 and 20. Then what does he do?
Then he sell, and he like contracts with,
He goes back, right?
yeah, with what's his name,
McGugan, yeah,
and,
on an island, right?
yeah, and anyway, she says, yeah, the church can still use it as an easement, or can still use it on Sundays to park there, but they don't record it in the actual deed.
Okay, good. All right, so basically, after he already sells lot 20, he goes back to McGugan, who's the original owner, and he says, "Hey, can I buy this?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, but I want to call the church lawyer. Churches always have lawyers, it seems, and they basically draft an easement, right? And the easement is to run with the land so long as it's used as a church, and that people can park there during church purposes. Okay, so that easement was entered onto the land, and then Brooke, he sold the land back to the to Willard, right? Was the easement and then the deed transferring the two of them? Okay. Did Willard take with any notice about this deed? But Did he have any kind of maybe notice?
I think he like could have, should have.
Okay, why could he or should he have known? What might have tipped him off about this?
So he owned lot 9.
Yeah.
So he knew that the church.
Yeah, he saw it, right? This wasn't a surprise. He was aware there's a church across the street, and any reasonable owner of property would realize, oh, wait a minute, every single Sunday this lot fills up with cars, right? Also, it said in the facts that Peterson said something like, oh, you know, the church may park there, you know, but he didn't mention the easement, okay? So what happens in this case is then Willard takes it subject to this easement, and he doesn't want it, right? If he wants to build something on this land, he can't build it if there's going to be church parking every Sunday. That would not be very effective, right? So he tries to set aside the easement, right? Stephanie, has he tried and set aside this easement? Okay, well, let's be very precise here, right? Who were the parties involved in the transaction, right? So there was McGilligan, right? McGilligan, right? I told you. I once had old lady in my class. My dad was here. He was like, "Don't say old lady. That's someone's mom." I was like, "Okay." So you have Miss McGugan, right? Okay. You have Peterson, and then you have the church, right? You know, I guess we have a little easement trinity, so to speak, right? So we have these three parties, and holy. Anyway, so you have these three parties together, and they are making this arrangement, right? So let's speak of this in terms of who's getting the benefit and who's getting the burden. The easement says, or let's go with this, Mariah. The easement says that the church can park on the land, right? So who's benefiting and who's burdening, right? Who's getting the benefit? Who's getting the burden? Okay, good. Who's getting the burden? Ooh, which one is it? Oh, or okay. Yeah. So you're seizing on the difficulty of this case, right? It's obvious the church is benefiting, but remember I said we have this, you know, it's a one-sided relationship. Each transaction has to have a one-party benefit and one party to burden. You can have several transactions stacked upon it, but they tried to save time, right? They tried to do it on the cheap, and they made it one transaction, transferred it with the easement on it. So it's actually unclear. There's really a burden on both of them, right? Because with the one transaction, both of them are getting burdened. Okay, so under the common law, by the way, which state, Mariah, which state is this case from? What did I say about California cases? Kelsey, what did I say about California cases? Anyone? California cases, what are they about to do? Reverse the common law. This holds like 90%, right? If there's a case from California, they are about to reverse the common law rule. It's almost without fail. I mean, it's pretty consistent, okay? So generally speaking, each transaction has one benefited party and one burdened party. So they tried to cut corners here. They tried to say, you know what? We'll do this one transaction, we'll transfer it to you, and we'll add the easement, okay? But it's not clear who's benefit and burden, right? So Kelsey, under the common law, how would this case turn out, right? Or at least how under the traditional, how would this case turn out? No, so under the common law, who wins here? Is the easement valid under the common law? Yes. So under the common law, the easement's void. Why is the easement void under the common law? What's this rule they come up with? Well, there's a specific rule. Michelle, what's this common law rule that makes this void?
Is it that the easement can't go to like a third party?
Yes. Yes. Under the common law, you cannot reserve a benefit of an easement for a third party, right? So what they effectively did here was they had three parties who were involved in this transaction, and they tried to reserve the benefit for the church even though it wasn't really even clear whether it would be the McGugan or McGilligan benefiting or the or Peterson. Everyone see that? Right. And this rule does make a little bit of sense because traditionally you have one transaction at a time, right? Parties were bargaining at arm's length. You didn't want to insert third parties into this. Right. So, Claire, what would have been the correct way to do this under the common law? It's a little bit tricky, but let's see if we can figure this out. What was the right way to do this?
To make like explicit grant in.
Good. So how many different transactions would we need for that? I think that's right. Let's walk through. What's the first one?
So the older lady.
McG. Yeah, Ali G. Right.
So her to Peterson.
Okay.
Oh no, her to church.
Good. So let me stop you right there. Why would McGugan not give it to Peterson right away? What happens once she gives it to Peterson? Dude's out, right? He's out. So it would be very risky and perhaps stupid for McGugan to transfer it to Peterson because he's like, sucker, and he's gone. So she gives the deed to the church, but with what condition? Okay, think about this.
With an easement and growth.
Oh, actually, let's try like this. Okay. She transfers the deed to the church, right? Okay. Let me try this. What's the final state? That's good, Claire. David, what's the final state? Like, what has to happen at the last level? Like, what's the third step? What do we know has to be the final state?
The church has to be
I'm sorry?
The church has to be Peterson.
How does Pearson have to own it at the very end of the game?
With the easement.
Okay, so at the very end, right, the last transaction has to look like this. Church to Peterson with easement. Everyone see this. At the very end, Peterson has to receive it from the party to be benefited, right? Peterson gets the land from the church with the easement on it. And Dave, in that case, who's benefiting and who's burdening?
Church is benefiting Peterson's.
Yes. I'll use your names here to simplify it, but you know better than that. Okay? The church will be dominant. Peterson, servient. So we know that has to be the final one. Okay? So let's go on to Blaine. What's our second transaction then, right? What has to happen in between? What's in other words, what happens here? What's be added to the deed? It's right there. Right? Stephen. What? This is almost too obvious. What's missing from here to here in the deed? Yes, the easement, right? The easement is what has to be added. Yeah, I think you were right there. Okay. I tried to break down really slow. McGugan gives it to church, right? There's no easements on this initial one, right? Then church and Peterson agree to the easement, right? And then the land's transferred with that easement. Everyone see how that works.
Would the church like actually have to technically own it?
Yes. Under the common law, you need to do these three separate transactions. McGugan sells to the church, they then record this easement, and they transfer it back with that easement on it.
So that would be a negative easement pertinent?
It's probably pertinent in this case, yes. You see why the common law rule is very messy, right? It required three transactions where, in this case, he did one. And as John astutely pointed out, for a brief period, the church owns it in fee simple, right? For a brief fleeting moment, the church owns it in fee simple. And they can say, screw it, we own it. Like, I don't know if you appreciate this. There's no guarantee 2 and 3 happen, right? If the church was acting in bad faith they could take it and run. Although that probably won't happen. They probably have some sort of escrow or some sort of agreement to keep the church honest, for all we know. Lord knows, right? But hopefully the church follows through. So the lawyers in this case tried to skip steps 1 and 2, and they just went basically straight to 3. They transferred an easement they transferred the deed with the easement on it. Under the common law, this is okay. Previous one's void because you can't reserve an easement for a third party. Everyone see that? Everyone get that? All right, so we're in California, Zugi. What do they do in California? What's the general rule? They get rid of it. Why did they get rid of the common law in this case?
They said they wanted to give effect to the intent of the rent for, and so if he wanted to sell it to Peterson,
Right.
could just with it.
Okay, very good. As with all California cases, they reverse the common law rule. They call this a feudal shackle, right? It says there's no reason to make the parties go through all these stupid steps. Why? Because we know what the intent was, right? McGilligan wanted to give the parking lot with the easement on it. There's no question about that. She wanted the people in the church to be able to use the parking lot, and that was the reservation. Okay? So it's transfer that matter. All right, everyone see that? Now, Daniela, let's pretend that you're the lawyer now for Willard, right? Okay? Pretend, these aren't the facts, but pretend you found out that they had done this third-party easement thing, right? Say you discover that. What do you tell your client? Do you tell if that's a void transaction or not before this case was decided? Yeah. What do you tell your client? Yeah. So follow me here, right? If you're Willard's lawyer, right, and you discover this deed, you say, hey, listen, this church has this easement on it, but because they didn't go through a third party, it's void, right? You tell your client, they try taking some shortcuts here. Don't worry, you got this. You're going to win this, right? Go ahead and buy it and put up a fence and keep the churchgoers out, right? So Danielle, would you be liable for legal malpractice if you gave your client that advice? Okay, good. So this is the difficulty of overruling the common law, right? I just illustrated it in a nutshell. If you are a lawyer in California and you're attempting to advise your client on whether or not this easement's valid, right? You say, listen, I read the law. This is void. Go ahead and buy it. It's fine. Okay. Now they say, just kidding. No one relied on it. Well, people did rely on it, right? People, in other words, if you're a lawyer and you find that your opponent made a mistake, you're allowed to take advantage of that, right? If you're a lawyer and you find that the other party didn't do something properly and that works for your benefit, you can take advantage of that knowing you'll win in court. Here, the church lawyer messed up. He didn't properly go through the law. He didn't do the three steps of the transaction. So Willard's lawyer, for all we know, said, these suckers, we got this. But then in the end, the Supreme Court of California, or whatever, the California Court of Appeals, reversed this. Okay? I want to see that. John? This is California. It probably hurts their case. That was bad. Church of Christ, so who knows? Scientists. Okay, what else? Other questions? Mm-hmm.
So is the guy, Willard's lawyer, liable for malpractice then?
I would say no. And this is why practicing law in a jurisdiction like California is very difficult because they frequently change a common law with no notice. We'll do several cases this year. I think we've already done 1 or 2 where there's been a rule that's been around since like 400 years ago, and then suddenly it's not there anymore. And the parties are put in a very difficult situation because the lawyer for the church should have been liable for malpractice, right? He advised his client to reserve this easement in a way that was entirely void. So his client wins, and then Daniela advising her client, right, did the exact right thing, and now your client's out of luck. And I ask this question every year, but if you own this piece of lot that every Sunday fills up with cars, you can't do anything with it. It's worthless, right? You can't build anything there. One year since said, oh, you can maybe build a billboard or something. You can't really do anything because the parking lot has to remain in its present form, and that runs with the land, so to speak. That will then bind all future owners of that land. You now own a worthless piece of property. Everyone see that? Questions? Tyler, let me ask you this question. What happens, again, this is an easement appurtenant, right? What happens if the church sells the land?
I mean, I guess as long as the other person continues using it as a church.
What are the specific words of the deed? How's it phrased?
Said, subject to an easement for automobile parking during the church hours for the benefit of the church, so long as the property for his benefit and easement is given is used for church purposes.
Church purposes, okay? Does it say which church?
No.
Okay. So what happens if it's sold to, I don't know, a mosque or a synagogue?
So church purposes.
Oh, okay. Now we get into fun questions, right? Because it is an easement appurtenant, it's not bound to a specific owner of land. It's bound to not specific name. It's bound to whoever on the land at that time. So you can imagine a difficult situation if it's sold to a mosque or a synagogue or whatever else. Is that church purposes, right? Would that be a valid fit for what a church is? And I don't have a very good answer for you, but that would be a tricky case. Now, if they sold to like a McDonald's or something, what happens to the easement? Let's see, Samaya, if they sold to like a McDonald's or a restaurant or something, what happens to the easement? Poof, right? Because is anyone doing church purposes at that point?
No.
Exactly, right? So I mean, the easement isn't necessarily infinite, right? It won't go on forever. If the church moves, they sell it to some other purpose, the easement effectively dissolves.
What if it's only at church on certain days? And I know that sounds weird, but I did undergrad at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, and there was this one building downtown that was a coffee shop on Tuesday nights, a restaurant on some other nights, but every weekend it was a church.
Well, that'd be a difficult question because the church parking is generally only on Sundays. Perhaps say, all right, you can have the property 6 days a week, we just only want it on Sundays. But that's not a very valuable use of your property because you can't build anything if you have to keep the lot free for parking. So I mean, this easement, right? This easement was very dangerous. It effectively relegated the land to nothingness forever. As long as a church is there, you can't do anything on the land. Every year, someone says they can build a billboard or I don't know, whatever else. I mean, but you're really, someone said they should build like a strip club billboard to try and scare away the church or something. I don't know. No one will want to park there then. That was one kid said that one year. All right, yeah, both, either one. So you can, yeah,
parking garage and then you're building.
As long, I guess, as the parking is unimpeded, that's both of you, okay? Yeah.
But how much of the lot has to be used for parking? Can't you just have one parking spot?
Okay, so let's do it. I mean, he read a second ago the language. If you were to ask me, you would have to leave when the easement was drafted. If I had to guess, you'd need to maintain approximately the same level of parking. Even worse, what happens if they start tearing up the, all those churchgoers with their, pickup truck, barely clean to their Bible. They're left there, tearing up all of your grass with their pickups, right? You have to repave it. You need to actually do maintenance to it if it's no longer serviceable. Or if there's bad weather, do you need to regrade it? Right. So this is a serious burden that Willard probably will not be able to get rid of this land. He's stuck with it, if I had to guess. All right. Any questions in this case? Your hand up.
I know you said that easement is like agreement and all that. Based on what you just said,
Well, how could they change it? Right? How could this easement be dissolved? What would have to happen? I'm sorry? Who would have to agree? Not the original owner. Who's the benefiting party? And who's the burden party? Willard. How would this easement have to be dissolved? What would have to happen? Think about it. Who's the only party that can release this burden? Oh, Willard's stuck. The church. The church would have to release their right to the parking.
so the easement creates the right.
Yes. The church, if they were paid enough money, or they felt the spirit within them, could release Willard from the covenant. I'm sorry, from the easement. Right? You see that? Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about bundle of sticks, right? You have the burden party, you have the benefited party. If the church releases their stick, then he has fee simple. It is free, free and clear. Yeah. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. Any other questions before we move on?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you make a decision to the attorney for the person that bought the land and say, just go ahead and build on the parking lot, we'll take our hit? I mean, how can you do it?
No, that'd be stupid. So if you violate an easement, you get an injunction from a court ordering you to stop construction. And you get damages, right? That's bad. You don't want it, I mean, that would not be a good idea. If you violate an easement, the church can come and sue on it and say, hey, we want an injunction stopping this construction, and we want damages for every day we can't have parking available. Yeah, easements are not jokes. When you put an easement on your property, that's a serious encumbrance on the value of your land. And that's something that's recorded and goes in the records office, and you know that forever and ever and ever. Anything else on this? No? All right. So the only other topic I want to talk about today is licenses. As if you didn't need another word to memorize. A license is basically oral permission. And I'm sure you've all given licenses at various junctures in your point. So if you let, a dinner guest come over, if you invited a plumber into the house, you invite the pizza delivery guy into the house, these are all licenses. These are generally temporary authorizations to trespass, right? When the plumber comes into your house, you don't call the police and arrest for trespass, right? Be our guest, right? He's your guest, and you've now welcomed him into your land. Licenses are oral, written, generally oral, but they can be written. But the key point is they're revocable, or revocable, some people say. Revocable, right? Generally speaking, someone comes into your land with a license, you can revoke it at any time. Easements are not revocable, right? Willard can't try and cancel the easement unless the church lets him. Licenses are revocable. What? They spelled it wrong?
I think so.
Is there an E?
It's a C instead of a K.
Oh. Okay. Like that? Bless you. Wow. That's a new one. I hear a lot of sneezes. That's a new one. Revocable to C, not a K. All right. So, any questions on that? That's pretty easy. Zoe?
That's the correct spelling. When it's just revoked, it's with the K, but when it's revocable or irrevocable, it becomes a C. It's weird, but that's the proper spelling.
Thank you. Was that you gonna say that too? Good. Okay. All right. Now we got that settled. Ty, let's talk about the Holbrook retailer, please.
Okay, so the Taylors had bought some land and they were using a road kind of through the Holbrook's land next to them to get to a public road
Okay.
while they're like building their house and stuff. And then the Holbrooks wanted them to not do that anymore.
Okay, good. So this case offers a gentle review of adverse possession, which you studied the first week of class, right? And you might remember we used this phrase the first week of class. I told you don't really worry about it too much. Okay? But now we have to worry about it a little bit more. So generally speaking, let's see, Brittany, how does prescription work? Remember that when we did adverse possession? It helps? Give me an example of what prescription would be. Remember an example, you know, to describe it. Nassim?
I can't remember.
Lee?
I have something in my notes here about the case we went over, the lawyer arguing prescriptive right, and also, that's all I have.
Oh man, let's see. Shamika? No. Oh, Shamira, sorry. Shamira, you're not in the right seat. I was. Do you remember? John?
How is it like for specific use? Like,
Wow, anyone remember prescription? Yeah, right there.
Isn't it the same elements of adverse possession, but it's like, I think it's peacefully rather than like open continuous.
Oh, like a beach.
Yeah.
It gives you rights, but the title remains in the owner. Like beach.
You gain a right by using it.
Yes, by using it. Using it. Oh wow, guys, we're class 11. That was like eight classes ago. That wasn't that long ago. Prescription refers to gaining a right through using something, right? So this isn't trying to gain adverse possession of a land to own it outright. This is about using something over and over again. So the classic example is walking across a path every single day for 10 years, right? If you walk across the same path every single day for a decade, you gain it through prescription, right? The same requirements there: open, notorious, hostile, continuous. All those requirements are there, but you're gaining a right to use a piece of land. Okay. Now, if you want to be precise, what we're talking about is a prescriptive easement, right? With adverse possession, you're actually gaining title and fee simple to the entire property. But with prescription, you're not actually gaining title to it. All you're getting is a right to walk across it, which is what we call an easement. Everyone see that? You're gaining an easement to cross along a piece of land. Everyone remember that? Good. All right, let's go back to Brittany then. Brittany, so with that being said, walk us through then the Holbrook case, please.
Okay, so, appellants purchased, a piece of property, and then in 1944, they gave permission to, Hall Road to be cut across it.
Okay.
To move coal, and then I think in 1949, the mine was closed. So
Good.
they wanted, all the movement of private land to stop. Then in 57, they built a house on their property, and then a roadway was being used by them and the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
And the house started in 61 and it wasn't replaced. And then in 64, they bought another 3-acre building site. And I think the people lived on that. And then in 65,
Then it gets bad.
the use of the Hall Road was by permission of the appellant.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think it was, said like how they would use the Hall Road during the period of time. Excuse me. And it was either adverse or uninstructed.
Good. Okay. So here's the deal, right? It's a 30-year span where a road is being crossed to various doing coal mining stuff, right? Initially, the crossing was done with permission, right? This isn't a public road, this is a private road. Initially, the crossing was done with permission. Nassim, when you have permission to cross a road, is there any claim for adverse possession or prescription?
No.
What's lacking in that case?
It's not. I know that.
Which element are we not having here? No. Lee?
Well, they're not exactly squatting on it.
What element of adverse possession is lacking?
Entry?
No. Mira?
I would say
It's only 4.
the house.
Yeah, it's unhostile, right? There's no claim of right. There's no hostility. If you're using land with permission, it's not hostile. By the way, if anyone goes on Louisiana, a few blocks from here, like where the Shell headquarters is, you'll see on the street this little plaque. I noticed this a week ago. It says, "You are using this sidewalk with our permission." Anyone ever notice that? Seriously, just walk along Louisiana, like where all the all the big buildings are, and there are these plaques in each corner by the walkway that says, "You are using this with our." Okay, why is that there, John? Why do they have that plaque there? Prescription. Exactly. That's because say there's someone who crosses that road every single day for a decade, and then they claim a right to cross that prescription. All right. Now Shell has a cloud on their title. Shell owns the building in fee simple, subject to this jerk's prescriptive easement. Right. They don't want that. Right. They don't want when they want to sell their building, sell subject to my easement. So they put this little plaque there on the sidewalk. So I'm guessing it's a private sidewalk. Okay. So for the first many years of this case, it was permissive, so there was no adverse possession, right? There was no prescription because there was no hostility, right? But that's not the end of the story, Derek. What's the other? I'm sorry, John. What's the other way by which they can gain some sort of right to this land?
I think you did it through like a stockhold by.
Good.
Good. Like the owner tells them, or doesn't like say they're not allowed to use it, or they make improvements
Right.
on the roadway. They can then.
What's good. Let's see. So, Derek, what's estoppel? John. Don't do that. Sean. Oh, Sean. What's estoppel?
Estoppel is when you were given permission to use like a road there or something, you can get improvements on it, and then the person's no longer construct here. You can't take it away because it would like.
Okay. What's the Catherine? What's the key phrase with estoppel? They probably said in contract or whatever. What's that phrase? Equity. What else? Alex. Reliance. Yes. The key thing for detrimental reliance, right? What's there, Alex? What's detrimental reliance mean? You've seen that phrase before, I'm sure.
I don't want to define it with the words, but I guess you rely on someone's promise and then you suffer some sort of damages from that.
Yeah, let me try like this. How about when you act based on someone's promise and then you suffer because of it, right? If you are using this road and you're expending money to improve it, I make all these improvements, all this other stuff, right? You've now relied on their promises to use it to your detriment, right? You've relied on it to your injury. Now they erect a steel cable, they put up a no trespassing sign, and you're out of luck. So all the money and effort that you spent to improve upon this road means you lose. Okay? I'll give you a hint. The way to win an estoppel claim is to spend money on something, right? If you've actually spent money on improving something, you have a very good chance of winning an estoppel claim. If you're merely relying based on things that you may lose in the future, you're probably out of luck. But in this case, they've been using this road for like 20 years. They've invested all this money to improve the stake of the road, and now they lost. Okay? So the court effectively says they lose on prescription, but we will find that there was detrimental reliance. They made improvements, right? And here's the trick. Once they have this estoppel, the license becomes irrevocable with a C. Right? The license is irrevocable. With estoppel, the license becomes irrevocable. So even though I told you at the outset that the difference between easements and licenses is that license can be revoked, this isn't always true. You'll learn that the history of servitudes, right, is that landowners try and find ways to make permanent controls, and the people who are being burdened by it find ways around it. The history of servitudes is courts crafting exceptions to land controls, which is what makes this topic so darn confusing. At every juncture, landowners say, hey, we got this cool thing called an easement. Oh, no, we can make that revoked. Oh, we have a thing called a license. Oh, no, we can revoke that. Oh, we have a covenant. Oh, this covenant doesn't bind. At every junction, it's the general. Okay. All right. Questions? All right. That's all I have for today. I'll see all of you on Wednesday.